Although it has been a while since my last Risk of Rain 2 video on the channel, over the past week or so there has been a bunch of new news and information on and about the game that is definitely worth sharing. A ton of stuff has happened for the game, a ton of stuff will be happening for the game, and there are also developer interviews out there that contain some really huge information. Because we've missed so much in the time between this video and our last, we're going to be focusing on the biggest pieces of information that we have. With that being said, this will still most likely end up being a pretty long video, so thank you guys for being here to watch it and watching as much of it as you do. Now that we've covered all of that, let's start by taking a look at a recent interview between PC Gamer and the co-founders of Hopoo Games, Paul Morse and Duncan Drummond. I generally care more for actual game news like future updates and finalized patch notes, but the content within this interview is too good to pass up and does also offer us a solid view into the game's future. Again, I am trying to keep the length of this video down, but there are too many major points within this conversation to pass up on. In terms of content for the game's future, there's a lot here. It is worth noting though, before we get into it, that it's not very clear whether the answers provided to the interviewer's questions are coming from Paul or Duncan, but the information would have equal validity either way. One of the first pieces we've got is whether or not future levels will be based on stages from the first Risk of Rain or if they will be new and unique designs and concepts. If you guys did not already know, the levels or areas already in Risk of Rain 2 are essentially 3D remasters of some of the first game's maps. With that being said, the team does not plan on taking this same approach moving forward and is excited to be creating fresh and unique content for everyone in the future. They did also acknowledge the possibility of returning some old map design concepts and mention that the community demand is a factor in the way things go from here. This is definitely not an uncommon approach for a small team like themselves, and when it comes to content additions for a game, I am a fan of the community-focused approach. I personally don't mind whether or not we get completely new maps or maps based on the first game, but knowing that the results here will be based on community demand is kinda nice. Next up, we've got some pretty big bits of information that were shared when the team got asked what they were planning to accomplish during their early access phase. As most of us know, within the game itself, we're able to see that there will be 4 more survivors added to the game, as well as artifacts which will allow players to alter the gameplay experience in unique ways. That's pretty old news. However, we did learn in this interview that they are now focusing pretty strongly on establishing a well-defined roadmap for the game and its future content. During early access, they are wanting to add more characters, more stages, more bosses, and more items. It is likely that the roadmap we eventually get will blatantly outline the order we get this sort of content in. I'm a big fan of content roadmaps for a game like this, so I'm looking forward to seeing whatever they drop. I know this next one doesn't really count as content, but they also mentioned after this same question that they want to have the game be super polished. There's no surprise there, but they also stated that it will include additional game features, platforms, and localization. If I've interpreted this correctly, it does seem that the game will be hitting additional platforms within its early access, which is really great news for console players that potentially follow this game. And finally, for big content news within this interview, we have our first bit of discussion for mod support in Risk of Rain 2. The team stated that it wasn't currently within their plans, but that they weren't closed off to the idea. While at a glance, this seems like really exciting news for those of us wanting to see mod support added for the game. A lot of teams for games and projects of this scope and size have taken this stance in the past, and their communities never did end up getting any forms of mod support. I'm not saying that it will be the case here, but I'm not expecting the community to have enough demand for mod support for the team to make it an actual focus for the game. It's not a bad thing when you consider that Hopoo Games is comprised of just 3 people. The way they invest their time and resources is quite important and likely always will be due to their small team size. Now on the topic of small team size, we've got some of our most significant information and the primary reason this interview even made its way into the video. When the team was asked how many copies of Risk of Rain 2 they had sold so far, they stated that within the game's opening weekend they hit over 500,000 players. This number is insane, especially considering that for most of us, this game came out of nowhere. 500,000 players does not mean 500,000 games sold though. In the game's opening weekend, players who bought a copy were also given a free copy that they were able to gift to a friend. I know I gifted a copy. I'm guessing a bunch of you gifted copies, and I'm guessing a bunch of you were also lucky enough to be given a copy. Anyway, simple math tells us that this means at least 250,000 copies of Risk of Rain 2 were purchased. And it's very likely that 250,000 sales is actually quite low, given that there are probably quite a few people who never gave away their gifted version, and there are also likely tens of thousands of sales that took place after the game's opening weekend. So assuming at least 250,000 copies were sold is a very safe bet. 250k copies at roughly $20 each amounts to $5 million in sales. Now, there are more financial factors in place, like Steam taking a 30% cut of sales, and also some unknown information like what the agreement between Hopoo Games and Gearbox means for revenue splits. Regardless, the game has made an absolute ton for a 3-man team and has very likely enabled them to acquire more resources, expand team size, or support this game for longer than they had anticipated being able to do so. It's not any sort of guarantee that more money earned means more long-term success for the game, but there certainly shouldn't be any lack of financial resources for the team to use in carrying out their original early access plans for the game. I'm trying my best here to cover the most important stuff first, but we are only just now getting to the details we've got on the next update for Risk of Rain 2. A couple of days ago, we got our second developer update for the game. It's great to see another one of the dev updates so soon, and just like the first one we covered in our last Risk of Rain video, there's a ton of stuff here. If you guys are familiar with the first developer update, you'll recognize the formatting they used in the second one. Just as before, there are 3 key sections: major points, minor points, and the stuff that they are working on. While the major and minor point sections give good insight into where the team is at and where they are likely to focus next, for the purpose of time, we're going to get right into the most important section of this information, the stuff that they are actually working on. As we saw with the first dev update and the first game patch, the stuff that they are working on blatantly indicates what will be in the next game patch, as it should. And just like dev update 1, there are plenty of things they state to be working on in dev update 2. We're simply going to run through the list item by item and break down the pieces as needed. First up, as discussed before, they are working on their early access roadmap, which will be outlining the bits and pieces of content on their way to players of the game. Roadmaps are excellent to have for projects like this, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they structure theirs. Next up, they are adjusting the way the game saves player data, because with the current system, some players are experiencing corrupted save files or a lack of game saving altogether. I'm happy to say that I haven't had any trouble with this myself, but I'm sorry for anyone who has lost progress as a result of the save issues. They're aware of it, they're working on it, and hopefully it is fixed for you in the next patch. Apparently there's an issue that causes players to fall through the floor when entering a new stage, which I'm assuming just results in the player experiencing the same effects of falling off of a level's edge, but again, I have yet to experience this one for myself. There's currently an item in the game called Wake of Vultures that is said to allow players to gain the power of elite enemies upon killing them, but it currently can result in suddenly losing half of your health, which is not an intended effect. I'm pretty sure I actually died from this one earlier today, so for now just don't pick up the Wake of Vultures. Here's a quick picture to give you guys a rough idea of what it looks like. Best of luck not picking it up. They are also improving Multi's equipment swapping logic. I'm unsure if this one is claiming his weapons and actual equipment as equipment, or if it is exclusively focusing on his equipment items. Either way, I'm sure we'll have more information on this one soon. I'm guessing this one's going to be a nerf to Multi that involves some sort of universal cooldown, but again, we're just going to have to wait and see. They are also changing or fixing, depending on how you look at it, calculating burn damage. Burn damage does not calculate properly at the moment, and it can result in very quick and unavoidable deaths despite not being meant to. I'm really excited for this one in particular since it seems to be my #1 cause of death. But for now, continue looking out for Wake of Vultures and fire damage enemies. They are going to be reworking ice and lightning elites in order to make them more threatening to players. I'm hoping that they do this one in a smart and creative way that doesn't take any enjoyment away from players facing the enemy types. As with a lot of other elements of the game, they likely will be focusing on fun here, which brings us to one of our best pieces in this update. I'm really excited for the roadmap, but I might be most excited for this one. The worm fight is going to be improved with the goal of making it more fun. The worm fight is by far my least favorite to get at the end of any stage, so I'm really excited to see what they end up doing here. But for now, continue looking out for Wake of Vultures, fire damage enemies, and the worm fight. And especially don't be using the Wake of Vultures while fighting a fire damage worm. There are currently some text issues with certain language fonts that they use in the game, and they are fixing that. And while it doesn't seem like a big change or fix, it is nice to see them polishing up details like this. Apparently proc coefficients, which were briefly explained in Dev Update 1, are inconsistent for certain survivor abilities. It's blatantly stated that Artificer's proc coefficient is very low and that they didn't intend for it to be that way. Artificer is currently one of my least favorite classes to play as, and I'm hoping the change that they make to him makes him more usable for me. By the way, if it's not blatantly clear, I have no idea how to say that. I don't know if it's Artificer, Artificer, I don't know, whatever. They simply stated to be working on lots of bug fixes and quality of life improvements, which some of the previously mentioned items are, but whatever, it's a list item, so we included it. And last but not least, they are actually adding in some community suggestions that they gathered from the community through Discord, Twitter, and emails. A very nice finishing touch to what they are working on, and definitely something I'm quite curious about. All in all, the team is clearly still killing it. Having this sort of momentum last would be amazing for the game and its community, and I tremendously hope that they can pull that off. I was originally going to also cover the game's first patch, which hit Steam about a week ago, but it doesn't seem as appropriate to include that information within this video anymore. I wanted to make sure that my next Risk of Rain update, which is this one, covered a ton of good stuff, and the patch no longer seems relevant enough because of the time that's gone by. Either way, I hope that this video was worth your time and that you enjoyed watching however much of it that you did. I spent a little bit of extra time on this one trying to make sure it was well organized since there were so many pieces to include. So if you did like it and want to support the channel as a result, please leave a like on the video, share it anywhere or with anyone you think may be interested, subscribe with notifications on if you have not already, and also comment on the video about literally anything pertaining to the video or otherwise. We are quickly approaching 19,000 subscribers, which is feeling great, and your support in that and in the future is super well appreciated. I can't thank you guys enough for your support on the last few videos, this video, and future videos as well. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. I hope to see you guys in a future video.